the Nürburgring. It's not everybody's cup of tea. In fact, only those who have tasted the Notch Life are qualified to drink from this cup. So clearly, you aren't. Because you see, this is not the i20N, the car that got its name from the Nürburgring, because it was perfected on the Notch Life. This is the i20N line, which simply borrows the design cues of the i20N. Now, those of you who think that Hyundai is cheating you by doing that, well, it's the same difference between a Mercedes C63 AMG versus a Mercedes C-Class AMG line, or a BMW M car versus the BMW M Sport Kit. You know, not everyone wants over 200 horsepower to go to the groceries or to the gym. People simply want a good-looking car. Many just want a car that looks sporty. And I think, from that point of view, the i20N line has achieved that quite well. It begins with this exclusive shade of blue, which looks rather great, and the other color that I really like on the N-Line is the white with the black roof and the red accents. The N-Line wears a different grille too, which looks great with its checkered pattern. The N-Line badges in the grille, the fender, the tailgate, they all distinguish this trim from the regular i20. Though the N-badge skirts, like the powerful i20N, that would have looked much better in my opinion. Complementing the look at the rear are the two exhaust tips, which add a bit of drama. The red highlights stand out quite nicely and are complemented further by similar accents inside the cabin. The all-black cabin looks even sportier with the red ambient lighting and the metal pedals. The sporty seats get leatherette upholstery, which feels nice to the touch. The infotainment system is unchanged over the i20, but gets more connected features and voice commands now, along with 16 free over-the-air updates for the sat-nav maps, should you decide to go hunting for mountain roads with this fun new package. So is it sporty enough to drive? Well, when I drove the i20 for the first time and I reviewed it, I had talked about how the 1-liter engine with the automatic, the DCT, is quite a nice package, quite a likable package, but paddle shifters were sorely missed. I wanted that. I wanted a differentiation in terms of the design as well, especially since Hyundai had managed to give a different design to the Verna Turbo as well. Now, all those things didn't happen on the i20 because the N-Line was coming. This has the visual distinction, of course, and this also has paddle shifters, nice big chunky paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. In fact, it has a different 3-spoke steering wheel as well. Feels quite nice to hold, feels a little bit better in the DCT because you get the paddle shifters. The IMT without the paddle shifters, it just feels a little, yeah, the steering feels a little different to hold and not a great feeling there. But the paddle shifters, well, they are not really working the way they should. For example, if I'm over 4,000, 4,500 RPM and I want to downshift for an upcoming curve, it doesn't. I have to be under 4,000 RPM to be able to downshift. What's the point of a manual override then if I'm not able to push it to the limits? The reason why it's doing this is essentially to protect the gearbox and to protect the engine, because if you were to downshift at anywhere beyond 5,000 RPM, there's every chance that the revs are going to be higher, it's going to hit the limiter, it's going to be close to the red line, and it doesn't want you to be close to the red line to protect that engine and gearbox. But that clearly is a bit of a downer because sometimes you are expecting that downshift to happen, it doesn't, you're giving the input again, it still doesn't downshift, it's only when you let the revs drop under 4,000 RPM, and that is when it lets you make the downshift, and that just takes away the driving fun that this car promises on paper. Hyundai claimed that the DCT will go from 0 to 100 in about 9.9 seconds. We have tested the regular i20 with the petrol DCT in the past, and it's given us a sprint time of about 10.4 seconds, and I expect it to remain the same with this as well since there is no tuning change to the engine. However, the big differentiation between the engine that you get in this car versus the engine that you get in the N-Line that is sold in Europe is the 48-volt mild hybrid system, and I think that would have really made a lot of difference if Hyundai were to integrate that. Of course, it would have escalated costs, which is the reason why it's not here, but in terms of the economy, in terms of the emissions, it would have been a much cleaner, much more efficient system, and that unfortunately is not present on this particular package. What that means is that the fuel economy is still a bit of a worry. We've seen single-digit figures with this powertrain in the past, especially in the city. Out on the highway, you get up to double-digit figures. So that is something that you'll have to contend with. But then again, it's an enthusiast car, so fuel economy probably may not matter so much to you. Though I feel that eco and sport modes would have solved some of the concerns, but I think the better solution would have been the 48-volt mild hybrid system like the Euro spec i20 N-Line. It would have not only aided a better low-end response, but would have also addressed the concern of the fuel economy, which has in turn pushed Hyundai to be more conservative on the engine tuning and the gearbox responses. Then again, Hyundai claimed that 52% of the buyers in the premium hatchback space are first-timers. So probably they would not notice or complain about all the concerns that I have raised from an enthusiast point of view. Probably that percentage is also the reason why Hyundai doesn't see the need for a clutch pedal in this car, because even the manual is the IMT type, which gives you the joy of a stick shift without the pain of operating a springy clutch. But I think I would still go with the DCT despite everything that I've said, and that's because of the convenience that it offers. I pointed out with the i20 that it has a bit of understeer when you start pushing it hard around bends, and that doesn't change for the N-Line either, because not like it gets any electronic differential. So yes, that understeer is still there, but what makes it different, what makes it more manageable is the fact that because of the Torter suspension, the body roll is one less thing to worry about. You don't get a pronounced dive on the outer wheels, so you are able to get much cleaner lines into a corner. Once you get used to the understeer, once you understand what kind of throttle modulation you need so that you don't get that kind of understeer or the torque steer, you will be able to enjoy this car a lot more.
Now the 6-speed IMT, well, it isn't the perfect complement to the N-Line i20. I would kind of say that the DCT is a far better transmission in that regard, because not only is it a quicker transmission, you also get paddle shifters, which makes it feel a lot more sportier, makes it feel a lot nicer. But having said that, there are ways to get the IMT to work out efficiently. Now here in urban conditions, the IMT is a fairly decent transmission option to have. But out on the highways where you want a little more performance coming out of your car, well, that's where you need to learn how to use the IMT transmission. And there's a trick to this, because once you rev hard, you need to get off the throttle pedal, shift, and get back on the throttle. You cannot seamlessly use the IMT transmission like you would a regular manual. And that shift quality possibly is the only drawback for that IMT transmission. Otherwise, it's a perfectly good transmission. It's exactly the same as the manual transmission.
Hyundai have also made changes to the suspension setup. They've given it 30% firmer damping, and what that translates into is slightly tauter feel when you're driving around the bends. I'll first begin with the downside. I've already complained that the regular i20, it feels a bit on the firmer side for everyone's liking. It feels very European in that sense, and this is firmer still. So if you have not enjoyed the ride quality of the regular i20, this is not going to do anything better for you. What's also happening because of the slightly firmer setup is the road imperfections that are very common, and we are talking about Rajasthan roads here, which are one of the best. So even here, you can feel the car floating quite a bit. You can feel the vehicle tracking quite a bit over all these undulations, and there is that constant movement inside the cabin. It moves from its side to side, even on very simple road imperfections, which are prevalent everywhere. And on the sharper stuff or the harsher stuff, it just gets amplified even more. So if you're looking for a very comfortable ride quality, maybe go with the regular i20 or look at something else. The N-Line is not for you. But if you want something that is tauter than the i20 or any Hyundai for that matter, this one is the one to go, because once you hit the twisties, you will appreciate the firmer setup. There is a nice sharp turn in. The body roll is quite controlled. It all comes together quite nicely, and you will enjoy the driving dynamics of this car. To that effect, Hyundai have also changed the tuning of the steering. They've given it more weight. It feels more direct as compared to the regular i20. It feels quite nice. That vague at center feeling is gone. It feels more direct even at center, and it's got a nice weight to it. On the highway, it still doesn't weigh up as much as I would have liked. It's still sort of maintaining that same weight that it has even at slower speeds, or at least it feels that way. It doesn't feel as tight as I would have liked it. But then again, this is a vehicle that is aimed at people who are going to be enthusiasts, yes, but they also need to drive and commute in the city all the time. So that's why I think they've tried to achieve that balance, but I would have liked a bit more weight at highway speeds. It's still got a bit of that play when you reach highway speeds. The other thing that Hyundai has played around with are the brakes. So finally, if you want 4-disc brakes, if you want more safety systems, this is the car to go, because you have more standard safety features on this compared to the other trims of the i20, and you also get all 4-disc brakes. Now Hyundai claim a very marginal 1.4% improvement in the braking distance. You need 1.4% shorter braking distance as compared to the regular i20. I know it doesn't amount to much, because 1.4%, that's hardly anything, in terms of the meters. It's almost, human error is more than that. So 1.4% doesn't amount to much, but what it has improved is the braking confidence that you get with the car. It feels a lot more confident when braking. What some of you may not like is that the brakes feel a bit too grabby. They feel a bit bitey, and especially at city speeds, they just feel that they're just grabbing onto the brakes a little too sharply, and that may not be to everyone's taste. But again, it's something that you just need to get used to. Once you get used to it, then modulating the brake pedal is going to be relatively easier. But yeah, compared to the regular i20, these brakes feel a lot grabbier, and the brake pedal doesn't feel that it has the same kind of travel. It grabs on quite early in that brake pedal travel. The other thing that you may have noticed are those 2 exhaust pipes at the rear. So essentially, it's just a different muffler unit. They haven't made changes to the entire system. So it's basically like a full system versus a slip-on. So what's happening here is you will hear a slightly amplified sound on startup, and there it feels quite good. But once the revs rise, it all smoothens out. You don't really hear it all that much. I understand where Hyundai is coming from. They still have to adhere to the emission norms, to the sound norms, so they can't really give you a very free-flowing system, so to say. But the downside to this is, because it's only the muffler, all the sound is getting amplified only at the muffler. But when you give the throttle input, you can feel this a second and a half worth of delay between you actually using the throttle and that amplified sound coming out of the exhaust. So there is that disconnect between the two. And yeah, to the onlooker, it may not feel like much. It may not, no one will obviously notice the difference. But when you are driving the car, that's when you will feel that disconnect a little bit when it comes to the sound. Otherwise, I'm quite impressed what they've managed to do with a 3-cylinder engine. 3-cylinder engines inherently don't sound that good. They've still managed to make it sound quite nice. But as the revs rise, like I said, that amplification is not really heard that much. If anything, beyond the 5,000 RPM mark, the power starts tapering off, and that engines, it starts sounding a little strangled. So that's the only downside to it. Otherwise, yeah, for people who would want a slightly louder exhaust compared to the regular i20, this one does its job pretty well. Now, to add a little bit of perspective, it's not that this is the first time we are getting should I say hot hatch? Maybe not. Let's, in a global scheme of things, call it a warm hatch, lukewarm hatch. We've had these kind of hatches in the past. We've had the Maruti Suzuki Baleno RS. Didn't work purely because that engine wasn't exciting. The visuals, the treatment, the cosmetics, it wasn't too exciting either. So that vehicle failed. We also had the Punto Abarth, which had those loud Abarth graphics, which honestly looked quite good despite being so loud. It shouted that it was a sportier variant. It also had the engine to match, but it was a vehicle that had so much understeer that you just wouldn't enjoy driving it around winding roads the way you would want in a fast hatchback. And then the Fiat service, the Fiat ownership, that just made it worse. And again, that was the reason why the Punto Abarth failed as well. We had the Polo GTI, but it came at such a price that even though it came in such limited quantities, Volkswagen was struggling to get the final 4-5 cars sold. I think there's one still remaining with Volkswagen India. So that again sort of justifies what I said right in the beginning, that people don't necessarily want all the horsepower, they just want a vehicle that looks sporty. And I think with all of this, the i20 inline might have something going for it. It's got a decent engine, it's got decent kind of power, it's got decent figures, and it's a good looking car. So I think it has something going for it. It looks quite different compared to the regular i20. which is what will give it the visual distinction that the Baleno RS didn't. It has a decent enough engine, which again will give it the kind of distinction that the Baleno RS didn't. And at the same time, the handling package is quite good because of the new age electronics, because you have a good, nice traction control system that works pretty well, which again should give it the distinction over something like the Punto, Abarth, and that again should work in its favor. So overall, it's quite a nice package. There's quite a few things going for the i20 N-Line. How the market reacts to it remains to be seen. What is important, however, is the fact that with this, now Hyundai essentially opens the gates for the N-Line to come into India. Because if you see internationally, almost each and every vehicle that they have in their lineup has an N-Line trim, has that sportier trim, one that looks a little more athletic, a little more enthusiastic compared to the regular car. And I think with this car now, it opens for India as well. Hopefully we will have N-Line versions or N-Line trims on the Creta, on the Venue, on any vehicle that they now bring to the Indian market. So it shows a ray of hope. It also shows a ray of hope that they might at some point of time actually get the N series of vehicles to India as well. The ones that really have the big horsepower, the ones that really have the better differentials, the better electronics, the better handling packages. At what price? We don't know. Will they be accepted at that price? We don't know that either. But there is always that ray of hope. So yes, it is a good news that Hyundai is actually thinking out of the box. They are actually bringing the N-Line vehicles to India, because in the past we have only seen people cook up some sports versions with just a few decals here and there. This one goes a step further with all the suspension changes and braking changes and steering changes that it has done, and I think that is a good news, and we should definitely give Hyundai a pat on the back that okay, they are at least doing that for the enthusiasts out here, and hopefully it will just mean that better and better cars will come from the brand to the Indian market. Now to answer the most common question that I've got, is this better than the Polo GT? Compared to the older Polo GT TSI, the one that came with a better transmission, no. The new automatic, the new torque converter is just not as quick to respond as a DCT is. So in terms of the gearbox, I would still pick up this gearbox over the one in the Polo with the automatic transmission. The Polo's engine is definitely quicker. It's got better handling dynamics as well. So if the engine responses and the handling dynamics are the only thing that matter to you, if you're buying the car as an enthusiast, then I think the Polo GT is still the better package. It also comes at a better price. But if you want everything else, you want a modern feeling vehicle, you want a little bit more horsepower, you want quicker responses from the gearbox, I think it is the i20 N-Line. There's no other option. It looks great. It does its job really well in the city, both of attracting attention and also of purring around town without any problem. That gearbox just works well. Because even with the Polo GT TSI, which was the better package overall, most people chose it not because they were enthusiasts, but because that gearbox and engine combination worked really well. That convenience that it brought to the table was really nice. And from that point of view, the i20 does that job even better, because Hyundai's DCT is much better tuned for the Indian conditions compared to the DCT or the DSG in the Volkswagen cars. So from that perspective, again, I think the i20 N-Line does its job in the city rather well. Out on the highway also, it feels like a nice car to drive in terms of the handling that it has, the high-speed stability that it has. So it's a nicer car overall. It feels like a more modern car. There are no places in the car where you would just point a finger at and say, oh no, this feels old, this feels lackluster. There's nothing like that. It's got everything from the sound system to the connected tech to the touchscreen infotainment. I think everything just feels nice, modern and premium, and that's what I like about it. Of course, all of this comes at a big premium. We have spoken about it in the past. The i20 does come at a very high price. Is it a pricey car in that sense? Maybe, maybe not, because I've also said that it offers tremendous value in terms of the features that it packs in. And now the N-Line takes it to a different level. The question is down to you, whether you want to spend that kind of money on a hatchback or not. That's a different discussion, that's a different debate altogether. But if you were willing to spend that kind of money, I don't think there's any other hatchback that gives you this kind of value, because the amount of features it packs in is just phenomenal. And now with the N-Line trims, I think they've taken it to a new level, because the difference between the regular trims of the i20 versus the N-Line trims is much lesser than the sum of all the parts. You get the 4 disc brakes, you get a lot of standard safety tech, You get a lot of nicer features, more connected features, etc. And all of this just comes together to be a more expensive package than what the asking price or the price difference between the regular trims versus the N-line trims is. So is it value for money? In my books, yes. Would I recommend it to people? Well, if you want to spend that kind of money on a hatchback, I think this is easily one of the best, most well-spec'd hatchbacks out there. And it also puts a smile on your face with the little enhancements that they've done over the regular i20 in terms of the suspension, the steering, the brakes. So overall, I think it's quite an impressive package.